Christ about 2 months ago.
It was literally that night, right? It was that night.
Yeah.
Crazy thing. Oh man, I was so nervous.
1 2 1 2.
I felt at that moment Juliet was my hero. She's
I
I'm not going into that meeting. Who knows what that guy has? True story.
We're ready to start.
Yeah.
We're ready to start.
Actually, can we test the mic with everyone?
It works for one person. It's gonna work for everyone.
Just be careful not to knock the computer down there.
It says we're starting. It says an unknown error has occurred. I'll try it.
What's going on with the Braves game? Anyone know?
You want to check?
Yes,
Let me just say the Astros just clinched the ALCS.
Yeah, the Astros dominated that whole. Are you an Astros fan? You said it that way.
Braves are losing 4-2.
4-2. Oh, never.
I'm kind of rooting for the Braves in that series. Not just for Rabbi Schwartz. Are we ready? Are we on?
Oh, hey.
We're on.
Is this working? Can you hear me?
This is, like a hot mic right now, so be careful what you say.
I'm alright. I'm not.
No pressure.
What do you mean?
We're set up.
Are we going?
Whenever you
Can someone hear us?
anyone's watching.
Oh, come on. Give yourself more.
Eli,
People are watching.
just do a
People are
countdown.
watching.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
But there is Mishmar tonight, so.
I mean, it's been live for like a couple minutes.
Well, why don't you?
Benjamin.
Hello, I'm the editor-in-chief of The Boiling Point, and welcome to this news conference, which shall have its new head of school, Rabbi David Block. We are currently live on the Boiling Point website, as well as YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Welcome to everyone watching, and welcome to you, Rabbi Block. Thank you so much. We're glad that you've recovered from COVID since we've last seen you. And thanks for being very generous with your time and being willing to speak to us today and into the community. So on behalf of our staff, and especially all our readers and viewers, we really appreciate it. Today, The Boiling Point will ask Rabbi Block a variety of questions from his hopes and goals, beginning his time as head of school to COVID policy and the role and status of the JUST community. So we'll ask questions. I'm going to start out by just joining me today is Deputy Editor-in-Chief Liad Mahmali, Outside News Editor Juliet Weiner, Sports Editor Noah Elad, and Tour Editor Joshua Gamson. So we're going to get things started right now with Liad.
Hi, I'm Liad, and I'm the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of The Boiling Point. So we'd like to start by asking you about your long-term vision for Shalhevet. What are your goals for your time leading the school, and how might the school you've led for a number of years look different or the same from the school you inherited from Rabbi Siegel?
That is a great question. First of all, thank you for having me. This is exciting. I'm happy to be here, and I'm also happy specifically to help promote or help create a really great product of a newspaper that I'm very proud of and fully supportive of. And I think that the Boiling Point's been doing some amazing work. So thank you. I was a little nervous because last time we were together, it was that night that I started feeling symptoms and was eventually diagnosed with COVID. So the fact that you were all willing to come back is a big deal. In terms of my long-term vision, listen, I think there are a few different elements of what that means. Obviously, there are pieces. We continue to develop an amazing school, and there's so many arenas of where this goal kind of where my thinking plays out. So there are goals in terms of the students that we're getting. I want to make sure that we're still attracting and we are really getting the attention of students in this community, people in this community who want an education that is rigorous, that is thoughtful, and that makes them want to think a little bit outside the box. That makes them want to say, hey, my Judaism is really important to me. How do I actually make that a reality? How do I bring that into the world? So I want to make sure that we're still doing that in the community, and I obviously want to make sure that we continue developing departments within the school. The challenge of, and I'll expand a lot more on that, but the challenge is that one of the things that I think is really important is not to say necessarily, of course there's strategic planning. We've done this in so many different arenas. But part of what makes this place so special is that we're constantly willing to respond to and build a school that really speaks to the needs of our community right in that moment, right? So when I say, where's our school going to be in 5 years? Where's our school going to be in 7 or 8 or 9 years? So the answer is, I cannot tell you that exactly, because I don't know where our community will be in those number of years. But I'll tell you this, no matter where we are, right, I will still be asking that question, right? No matter what happens in 5, 6, 7 years, no matter where our community is, I guess the commitment that I'm making to this community is that I will always be asking, where do we need to be in order to cater to where our community is, right? In order to take our students and our parents and say, they're over here, they want to be over here, we want to help them, go from where we are to where we want to be. That depends on where we are. So there are obviously some stock answers that I can give, and I will give them. But I just want to point out that the answer to that question is only static if I assume that our community either remains the same, or if I don't care that our community doesn't remain the same. And I say, you know what, our goal is always this, but that's not necessarily true. We're constantly want to make sure that our students are doing what they need to do, and we're meeting them where they're at. That having been said, I think there are some areas that we could really grow. We have amazing departments in the school. Amazing. I want to take those to the next level. I want to make sure that our students are getting the opportunity to have all of the rigor in their classes, which we have right now, but even to expand our offerings, to make it, there are certain specialties. It's hard. We're a small school, so we have to run somewhat of a lean operation. But to be able to make sure that we are growing and providing the courses and classes to the students in all ways, to really make sure that the very next generation of everything is coming from Shalhevet. That means the next great scientist that comes up with some remarkable discovery. I'm being somewhat over the top, but I really believe that. Why not, right? We're providing such an amazing education. I want to make sure that we're continuing to support that. Great historians and great everything, poets, mathematicians should be coming from Shalhevet. It's certainly true. I really believe this. And I think Rabbi Siegel believes it as well, is that the next modern Orthodox Rosh Yeshiva, right? You can turn that off if you want. Sorry, I know that's loud. You just press start. There you go. Look at that. That the next modern Orthodox Yeshiva, the next, the Gedolei Torah, right? The people, the men and women who are going to be leading our Orthodox community, the modern Orthodox community, why shouldn't they come from Shalhevet? And that means that we have to make sure that we are not only teaching at a high level, but that we're giving them all the skills to be able to learn in the most serious Batei Medrash, and the most serious, and also to be the people who are thinking about what does our community need. That's what these Gedolim do. That's what these poskim do. That's what these leaders in our community. They understand people, and they understand Torah, and they understand our community, and we're able to lead and guide. And those people should come from Shalhevet also. Ultimately, I think Shalhevet is, and aspirationally should be, a flagship modern Orthodox school in the world. And that does not mean modern Orthodox only by the demographic that we serve, but by the ideology that we teach and embody. And that means a lot of things. It means that we obviously see value in both general and Judaic studies, but not general studies because we need to, and not general studies because we need to get jobs, but general studies because it actually enhances our lives, it enhances the world, it enhances everything that is generally in the religious sphere is also in the general studies sphere. That what we can do and bring ourselves closer to God, bring God's values into the world, all of that, it happens through our general studies as well as Judaic studies. It also means seeing spirituality in everything. Seeing spirituality and noticing that the entire world are places for spirituality. At home, when you're watching TV, when you're at a meeting for, eventually a PTA meeting, how you should pick up your kids from school, when you're trying to fit everything should be moments for spirituality, moments to say, this is when I can implement the values that I learned. The values I learned from the Torah, from the world. That's what modern Orthodoxy. Modern Orthodoxy says that God created a world, and I'm going to infuse that world. Because I'm not going to push it aside. I'm going to infuse it with Kedusha. I'm going to infuse it with holiness. And then to take the world and also impact our lives. I think that those leaders should be coming from Shalhevet. And you can say, okay, are those exactly modern Orthodox values? We all believe in those. Okay, but are all schools actually teaching towards those values? Do we have teachers and educators who are committed to those values? We're doing that. We're trying to do that. And I want to continue to build that. And I really expect a ton from all of you, by the way. That's the way I look at it. I really expect a ton. You're specifically, everyone. But this crew is unbelievable. When you go out into the world, the world needs so much help. I don't say that pessimistically. The world needs so much help. Why should the people who are thought leaders and actual communal leaders and those who are creating societal change and bringing those values, why should they not be Shalhevet students?
Okay. So continuing to dive into that question a
I'm
little
going to
bit.
make sure every answer is as long as that one.
So what are your first goals? Things you hope to accomplish within the next year? And is there anything you would like to see change at Shalhevet just as soon as possible?
Great question. We have had, I think, I would love to shore up some. There, as you know, Dr. Evans left. There have been some faculty departures, so we want to make sure that we're filling those roles with the best possible people for our students. So those are obviously short-term goals. I want to make sure that we are filling all of those positions that we need. Thank God we're off to a really good start. But things like that. We've had a few departures. I think it's true throughout. I think it's true in many schools that COVID burnout. I'm happy to talk about that. But there are elements of all employers that have to kind of reconsider certain things. So the first thing is to ensure that that our product is really strong. That we're continuing to invest in those places that might have temporary holes. And the other place is also to continue to build those departments. I think one of the things that makes Shalhevet so special is that there's this wonderful connection between faculty and students, both in general studies and Judaic studies, and to make sure that we are continuing to build those teams so that everyone feels connected to different faculty members. So really to build out our faculty and to support our remarkable current faculty and the work that they're doing. Those are really short-term goals. I think, as crazy as this sounds, getting back to a stage in which we can think beyond COVID is a great goal. I'm not saying that we're always thinking about COVID, right? But my short-term goal is I want to make sure that we're spending our time on the things that, the educational elements that matter. COVID obviously matter. I mean, the policies obviously matter deeply. But the reason, right, we send our students to Jewish day schools, those values, I want to make sure that the entire community, students and faculty, are in a space that we can start thinking about those things again. That COVID is not behind us. I don't know what that's going to look like, but that we feel confident enough that we're taking care of it, and that perhaps we're able to kind of look beyond those pieces, so that we can focus on the things, on the reason that all of your teachers went into education, and the reason that you're here. So that's thinking about. I always use this rubric, if you don't mind me saying. I always use the rubric. Thinking about what's really, really important, and not only what's urgent, right? Both are really important to focus on. But the real change happens when we say, hey, how can I think creatively? How can I take us to where we go? Not because I need to this second, not because my back's up against the wall, but because those are the things that matter. That's where we really distinguish ourselves as an institution, that we're willing to take risks and we're willing to be creative in areas that perhaps others aren't thinking about.
Okay. Amazing. So you've taken over as head of school just as Shalhevet begins its partnership with Nishmat Adin in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we know Nishmat Adin plans to eventually break away from Shalhevet and run independently.
Yes.
Is Shalhevet considering partnering with any other smaller Jewish communities to help them make the jump to have more Jewish education options? Or is this something you want to see more of while you are head of school?
Yeah, these are such great questions. Not that I'm surprised. I think, so the answer is yeah. Part of the initial charter, part of the initial agreement really with this community in Scottsdale was, of course, they were going to kind of turn into their own institution, entirely independent institution. If we're successful, then that's what we'll see. We have gotten interest from other communities. So far, I'm feeling the answer's 4, but in my mind, I can name 3. 3 other communities that have reached out to us and have heard about our product and said, hey, is this something that you'd be willing to do? We have a need for that. So on the one hand, it both warms and breaks my heart. It warms my heart that there are people who deeply want this sort of the product that we're offering. They see this modern Orthodox education. They see this thoughtful Jewish values, commitment to Jewish community, commitment to Torah, commitment to great academics, and they say we want to be a part of this. We don't have those options. It's heartbreaking because I wish they did. I wish they had those options in their communities. But I understand that not every community has the infrastructure right now to be able to support that. So would I consider doing it with other schools? Absolutely. But it really depends on how well this goes right now, right? We are constantly evaluating. I don't have an answer for that yet. We'll have a better answer in a few months, and even a better answer at the end of the year. I mean, we'll have a sense of whether this experiment is working. So far, it's been wonderful, by the way. But so far, there are always things you have to work out and tweak. So the answer is, would I consider? Absolutely. Would I love to see? And we have so many talented educators in this building and so many remarkable students. why would I not want them to have to for their wingspan to expand, right? Why would I not to give them a larger reach so that more people can learn? I mean, can you imagine more people in the country kind of like learning from Dr. Keeter and Rabbi Lieberman and Dr. Harris and I mean everyone, right? It's crazy, right? And I think that we have an opportunity to, I mean, in all seriousness, how many other day schools are doing this right now? Can you imagine if other schools, I'm being very serious, had access to Miskeen? That's a big deal. And I think so I see this as fundamental to our mission of spreading who we are to the world, right? And giving people access to those things. But I don't want to do it at the expense ever of our students, which thank God has not been the case. And I want to make sure that it works, right? So we have to make, and it's not putting too much of a burden on others. And by the way, I don't only mean educators, our students. Our students are getting along so well with the Scottsdale students. It's awesome. So why would I not want other communities to have access to you, right? So the answer is yes, but only if this works. I'm not going to force anything, right? I think it's a wonderful model, but we're not going to force it. And we have to consider scale. Right now, I have two students, right, in our Gemara class, right? Now, and they're technological kings, right? Meaning the owl is not always working. As soon as we get that working, I think it's going to be perfectly fine. Do we want a ton of students on Zoom in the class? 2 is perfectly fine. 2 is wonderful. Do we want in 3 and 4, 5? Do we want to expand that more? We have to see. We have to see what that looks like and how that impacts education. So those are questions that we're going to be evaluating. But from a mission perspective, yeah.
Okay. So you said that other communities have expressed interest in a similar program.
Mm-hmm.
Can you possibly share which other communities have expressed interest?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Is there any reason not to share which communities have shared? There are someone from. Actually, I don't know if it was there were private calls. Maybe I shouldn't, but I should say that there was someone from a community on the East Coast, on the southern East Coast, reached out to us. There was someone in the Midwest, and then someone right in the heart of America reached out recently. I just don't know yet. I don't want to call those communities out because if they hear it from so, but they were really positive. One was from an actual educator and a person of leadership in a leadership position there, and then the other 2 were parents or potential parents who want their students or want their children to experience like this, and got the sense that many in their community wanted to also. I just don't want to share that until I get permission from them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now, turning things over to. Thank you. So now turning things over to talk about some recent policy changes with Hashkama Minyan. So what do you think about, or do you support the ending of the school-wide daily Hashkama Minyan?
Oh man, I support what we decide as an institution. Is that a good political answer for you? No, I think I'll tell you this. There are a lot of pros and cons to it. I love and loved Hashkama Minyan. I loved it in its previous iteration. I thought it was one of the coolest things that any school is doing. I think it's still pretty cool. It is still, the core of it is the same, which is that students are coming into school early, largely for the purpose of learning more Torah later, and they're choosing to daven in a minyan that's really run by students. So the core of Hashkama is still there, right? That happens every day. The difference is that now it's not accessible to everyone, right? It's accessible specifically to the people who are opting into AGS. So there are pros and cons. I think the reason we decided to move in that direction are 2 reasons. Is this what you wanted, the reasons? Like kind of the thought, or just whether I agree? Both. Okay. The reasons were 2. One is it became really hard to know because we gave options for everyone to attend that minyan every day, and you could choose one day to go and one day not to go. It became really, really hard to keep track of just administratively who is at which minyan, right? Now, our goal isn't to police everyone, but davening is a very serious value at the school. It is absolutely required. So we want to make sure that we're enforcing that properly. So it's very hard when people are in a different minyan every day. It became administratively burdensome to be able to keep track of who was at davening and if everyone was, and it became very difficult. The second reason is that it really created a diluted minyanim later, right? Because you had so many people at Hashkama, and then you had a Sephardic minyan, and you also have a regular minyan, and you had a few electives, and we didn't get a full feeling. We had awesome tefillah experiences, but what was missing, at least in the regular main minyan, was like the feeling of like the school being together to daven, which I think is really valuable, that communal feeling. So the solution that was proposed is what the current iteration is that we limit hashkama, still very nice, still robust, but we limit hashkama to people who are in AGS, and then we get more of our community to have a really beautiful regular davening at the time, and then we know who's at hashkama, we don't have to worry about the administrative piece, and we have a really nice regular minyan. Disadvantage, it was really nice to be able to opt into hashkama at any morning, and it was a beautiful minyan. And when I first came to Shalhavet, on my interview days, and I flew out for 2 days, and the first time I came, and I had worked in other schools on the East Coast, and I came and I saw Hashkama and I was blown away. I'm like, this is crazy that it exists. I went upstairs today to see our prospective students who are at Hashkama, and the truth is I felt the same way. The minyan was really great. I know it depends on when and where, but the minyan was really great. So I really think that Hashkama was one of the coolest things that we did, and I'm hoping that the heart and soul of it is maintained. But I'll also tell you that our Judaic leadership, who convinced me, I was, to be honest, and I think they wouldn't mind me saying this, I was a little bit more, I preferred to try to keep with the old model. But I totally understood their points, and I obviously trust their leadership, and I said, oh, great, let's try it. And I think it's worked really nicely. I think there are certain things that we're going to have to revisit and see whether we want to continue this way. And they know that it's kind of something that we're trying and experimenting with. But I think to their credit, they had a vision, and we as a school and our leadership were able to implement it in a way that has been effective so far. Yeah.
So you said that that you hope the heart and soul is maintained and that like Hashkama is still basically there. But one of the key differences is that Hashkama started out, it was started by students at Shalhavet, and it ended with with practically no student input and no community input. It was never brought or discussed in town hall. Do you believe that ending it for everyone except for people in honors classes should have been discussed in town hall?
It's a fair question. This is always the fine line in our community, right? Like it's not even a fine line. It's just it's a murky line. Like we don't know. There's certain things that get discussed, and there's certain things that aren't. And I would absolutely be open to a conversation, and I think you should suggest that to Rabbi Schwartzberg. I would absolutely be open to discussing this at town hall, and I think we even discussed that. I'm not sure why it didn't. I don't remember why it didn't happen, but absolutely to have a conversation with students about, hey, here are the challenges that we're facing. Here's the proposal. What do you think? Whether it would be up for a vote because it is an educational thing, which usually isn't under the purview of the just community, or not. But I could see. I'm very open to that. I just think that sometimes, because this is an educational decision, because it really impacts how the administration takes attendance and figures out things about AGS and all of that, I imagine what happened. I'm guessing, because I have to go back and really remember, or look at the emails and the conversations. But I imagine it felt more of like an educational decision, as opposed to something that would be under the purview of their community. But to be honest, I think it very well could be and still can be. I will just say that it didn't. When it started with students, it started with a student suggestion, right? But ultimately, it was implemented by the administration. And I think I don't know the history. You'd have to.
That's exactly true.
You don't think that's true? Okay, so I don't mean to misspeak.
Noah Rothman.
Noah Rothman's here.
started
That's
it.
great. I don't mean to misspeak at all. I just the minyan, the heart of it is that it's still student run, and I think that's important. But you're right that this was not necessarily. This was not a conversation that happened with the just community. And again, whether it needs to or not, I know I'm just reiterating now, but I think that I imagine the administration felt like it didn't necessarily need to. And also, this is something that we needed to kind of implement before school started, and we didn't have just community over the summer. I think that's an important piece also. We didn't have town halls over the summer. But I think this is something that should be revisited by the just community. Why not?
So do you think that students have a right to vote on this?
I'd have to think about it a little bit more. It's not obvious to me that they should or shouldn't. Meaning I have to think a little bit more about the educational piece. But I would say this, that any proposal, and this is always true, would have to account for the challenges that the administration is facing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that it would be, students can vote on whether we have Hashkama in its previous iteration or not. It would have to be, have Hashkama in its previous iteration, and here's a way of tackling the issue that this new iteration tried to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I think I would be open to having certainly a discussion, maybe even a vote. I have to think about it.
Do you think that students would have benefited from an opportunity to weigh in on this or discuss it and then decide as a group? Because most of the people that actually attended Hashkama Minyan were not like brought into this.
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
sure. I think any discussion is usually helpful and usually towards the path of what what the Friedmans really intended when they started the school, which is that every conversation really contributes towards the development of our students, the moral development and the thoughtfulness of our students.
Yeah.
I just think that there are certain things that will not go through that process simply because the way we operate is like not everything can be a conversation, and but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be made aware when we missed an opportunity, right? Or even if we say, hey, listen, I hear why you would have made that decision without student input, but would there be benefit to having student input? The answer is yes, there would be benefit. Can we do it? Let's see, right? So I think that's where we're at here. It's certainly always important to have as many conversations as we can, just not always practical, but it might be. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna turn things over to Juliet.
Hey, Julie.
Does it reach?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for all your previous responses. And in one, you touched upon COVID. So
Yes.
these next few questions are going to go into like depth on Shulhevet COVID policy. So an email was sent July 28th titled COVID Vaccine Message from Shulhevet Medical Task Force, signed by the Shulhevet Administration and the Shulhevet Medical Task Force. And it said this: unvaccinated students may not be allowed to attend school trips or special programs. They will be able to participate in co-curriculars, but likely will not be able to go on special trips associated with those co-curriculars. Will unvaccinated students be allowed on school trips?
Yes.
Okay, great. Are there any caveats to unvaccinated students going on these school trips, or it's just as if they were going as a vaccinated student?
What we're considering right now, especially with the upcoming chesed trips, is the real issue on the chesed trips. Not the issue, the potential area of exposure is when you're sleeping in a room, right? So having vaccinated students room with other vaccinated students and unvaccinated room with unvaccinated is something that we're talking about right now. Other than that, we're having all students obviously test beforehand, right beforehand. It's actually within the 24 hours right before the trip, and then following all the protocol that our medical task force recommends and really requires of us. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Governor Newsom recently mandated that all public and private schools students will be required to vaccinate by one semester after FDA approval is
Yes.
given to ages 12 and up. Milken, SAR, Charles E. Smith, and other Jewish day schools already have vaccine requirements in place.
Yes.
Why doesn't Shulhevet?
It's right at it. I love it. I love it. Can I slightly tweak your
Yeah,
You're
sure.
asking a really important question. It's less compelling to me that other schools, which other schools have done it, and I'll explain why. I think that this needs to. Here's how I'll tweak your question. Why haven't we done it yet?
Okay, sure.
That's how I'll tweak your question. And I'll leave it at that for now. But I do think that it really depends on where our community is at. There are a few things that I want to be really clear about this and also very careful, because I think this can be misconstrued. Part of our job as educators is not only to have the answers to things, but also to be pedagogically sound, to be able to teach those things, right? If we teach something, anyone who's been in my class knows this. If I teach something and I find out that like everyone doesn't know it, or many people don't know it, so then who do I blame? I don't know if you remember this, but I always say that's my fault, right? If I teach something and no one learns it, then I didn't really teach it. And I think that part of our job as educators is to ensure that we don't only have, let's say, the right information, right, but also that we are educators, that we're actually moving the needle. How we say things, how we present things are really, really important. So you had quoted an earlier email of things that we were considering at the time, right?
Mhm.
We learned a little bit more about community. We actually made most things. That's one area that we shifted. But in most other areas, we actually made things more strict for the vaccinated, meaning we just leveled. We realized that there were breakthrough cases, meaning there were breakthrough cases.
Right.
So we had to test students who were vaccinated as well as students who were unvaccinated. Right. It wasn't necessarily loosening anything for unvaccinated. It was kind of realizing that this is something that affects both. And we're constantly. I don't remember why I brought that up, but it's something that is constantly changing. In our community. It's really important that we're speaking to the people in our community, right? Otherwise, and what are we? We're just like a voice, almost like a voice on the internet that says things and it goes into the abyss, and it doesn't really matter to whom we're speaking. And I don't believe that's our job as educators. Our job as educators is to speak to our community in a way that they can hear it. and in a way that's important. And we, from the very beginning, we've been very clear, and the email that you quoted, we're very clear that we highly, strongly, in every possible way, encourage vaccinations, right? And we want others to really to go for it, to really do it, to really become vaccinated. And we were noticing that the way that those conversations were more successful in getting people to consider getting vaccinated was by talking with them. By me talking with them, our medical task force talking to them. And when I say them, it's not like it's our community, people in our community. It's not like separate people, right? And we've been very clear about that, but I also think that people, when we start thinking of other people as normal, rational people, they're not just crazy, which is obviously true. We have an unbelievable community of very thoughtful people on all sides of all issues. It's really important to treat them in that way. So we had conversations, and we were hoping to move the needle, the proverbial needle in this case, as much as we could within our community. And that, our effectiveness in that realm, and there are people who have gotten vaccinated, many people, since we started this process. That is, we're constantly reevaluating that, how we're doing there, and reconsidering our policies, both based on whatever the larger CDC and state policies are and county policies are, and what our community needs and where our community is going. And we meet still regularly, even though you haven't seen any material changes to our policy yet. We are constantly reevaluating those things to see what can we do that is both aligned with our values, aligned with the science, and that also caters to our community as it ought to.
Great. And you mentioned community, so in like outreach to the larger community and talking to the community. So kind of related to that, we heard that Shalhevet and EULA are working together in formulating COVID policies.
Yeah.
Is this true, and if so, why, and in what ways?
Yeah, we have worked. I loved working with them on this, and I think that we worked with them for a few reasons. Number one, if this is a question about like what is right, if it's a science question, which is certainly a big part of it, and I mean, of course it is.
Yeah.
So then we shouldn't have differing opinions on that. We should come out with a stance as a community as to what our policies are, both because this shouldn't be something that it depends on the school. It should be something that is or isn't, right? And also because it's important that I know that a lot of people, for them, the most important thing is COVID. And it shouldn't be that people are choosing our schools. Thank God we have two healthy, vibrant schools in Shalhevet and EULA. And people should choose those schools based on a variety of factors, including everything from education to their social groups and all of that. And I'm not sure COVID should be a reason to choose a high school. And people can disagree with me on that. So the thought was, we are one community. We're a thoughtful community. Let's come up with something together, so that we can present to our community that people can plan accordingly and not think that, I'm going to choose this school because of their policy here or that school because of their policy there. We did not commit to always working together and always be in lockstep about our policies. This was just the initial conversation going into this year. What would it look like to see if we could work together? And we did. And our medical task forces spoke to one another. I spoke with Rabbi Safran. I had nice conversations about this, and we came out with something. Again, that doesn't necessarily indicate anything for the future, because the schools will continue to have to do what is best for their communities, each one individually. But starting off that way, I think, was really important.
Great. I'm going to hand the mic over to Leon now.
So continuing along the topic regarding COVID, have you heard from or about any prospective families who are worried about sending their students to a school that does not currently require the vaccine?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
By the way, I'm sure they exist. I'm not denying it. I'm saying I'm sure they exist. I just haven't heard that. We're right now really in the heart of admission season and getting. I'm meeting with people every day and making phone calls, and it may come up, sure, but no, I've not heard anything yet.
Okay. And going back to a previous answer that you mentioned, you said that we aren't requiring the vaccine yet. So when might the vaccine requirement happen, and what conditions would have to be to get it to now?
The conditions is not really something I can answer here, because there are so many factors that our medical task force considers. I don't make these decisions on my own, obviously. But the when question is really at any point. And the reason I say that is because when I say that we meet regularly, once to twice a week, we're meeting with our medical task force. We're meeting with different people, and we're having these conversations. So different factors need to be ready for it, but we are constantly discussing this question. The question that you just asked is the question that we're discussing. The fact that Governor Newsom announced what he announced, I don't know if that means it's going to be in January, right? It needs to be, my understanding is that it needs to be the 12 through 16 age group needs to have full FDA approval, and then the next semester after that will be required. So if that happens in the next 2 months, then I guess we're talking about the January semester, and if it happens beyond that, I don't imagine it could be as late as next September's semester, next August-September semester. I don't imagine it'll be later than that. So that's I'm not saying that's what we're going to be doing, but I'll say this: if we don't do anything until then obviously that would apply to us. That would apply to us. But I think that also plays a role in this conversation in terms of this is coming, this is imminent for our community, as I think it should be. So we're considering all of those factors regularly. I'm sorry that I can't give you more right now.
Totally
Yeah.
fine. Regarding masks in school. So while students are being told by their teachers to wear masks, many teachers often do not wear masks themselves. So how can students be expected to wear masks when there are teachers and administrators who aren't?
I hear you. I don't. It's a great question. The answer is I guess they shouldn't, right? But I'm really hoping that that's not the case, right? Meaning, if our teachers aren't modeling something, so then of course we can't necessarily expect our students to, unless our students are awesome and we're like, no, we're going to do it anyway. But I'm accepting the premise of your question. It's a great question. We know that just like students struggle with it, teachers struggle with it. But we've had so many conversations with teachers, and the hope is that the needle's moving in that also. It's not like you experience it more than me. I walk around the building, and it's once or twice that I've seen it this year. I haven't seen it more than that. Now, you might say, no, Rabbi, it's more than that. Okay, so I should know about that, and I'll continue to talk to them about that. But I haven't seen this rampant. I haven't seen this rampant. So we keep on bringing it up with teachers, and I've actually seen the teachers are usually the most careful about it. There might be one or two haven't. We speak to those teachers, and we know but it's really, really important. So the answer is that we'll have to do our job better.
Got it.
Yeah.
What
But it doesn't.
Yeah,
Until
go
we
ahead.
do, students still need to wear masks. Just want to be very, very clear about that. It's really important, and I know that it may not send that message, but it's really hard. The other day I was sitting outside with we were doing a project. We were doing our knowledge of God, knowledge of God's existence project, which is great. And I was going around to each group, and they were all spread out outside on our turf. It was like a great learning moment. And I was like going around and speaking with each group and helping them with their research. And then I went to another group that was working inside, and I went and I started talking to them. And then I realized, oh my God, I didn't put my mask back on, right? So those things happen. I think it's about, in that moment, reminding each other. Meaning, I would have been so grateful if a student said to me, Rabbi Block, you just stepped inside. You got to put your mask on, right? So I think it's about holding each other accountable in those moments, and acknowledging that it's hard, but still saying, hey, we can do this. Yeah.
Amazing. So what medical doctors and specialists are currently on Shalhevet's medical task force?
Yeah, this is public knowledge. I'm happy to answer it. I just didn't think it'd be
There have just been rumors that both Dr. Higashi and Dr. Rubin left, and that Dr. Milmed may have joined.
Good question. The medical task force is Dr. Drazen, Dr. Kupferman, Dr. Higashi, and Dr. Botnick. Yeah, that's our medical task force. Dr. Rubin left a while ago, and that was based on a few different factors that kind of were his ability to kind of be present with us and also do a few other things at the same time was hard. But that's our medical task force. So no, Dr. Higashi did not leave, and questions about Dr. Melmed is not officially on the task force right now. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm going to pass the mic to Noah.
All right. Hi, I'm Noah Lod, and I'm the sports editor. I'm going to be asking you some questions regarding the Gloverman tournament and then also just some COVID policies. So first off, will COVID vaccinations be required for players to participate in Gloverman? Will it be for other schools' players or for our players, maybe?
So Gloverman right now, these are great questions, and it's somewhat interesting. It's somewhat like uncharted territories because we're also speaking about LA County rules, then also coming from other places and like what. So what we're doing right now is that all players are going to have to take a PCR before they get on a plane. to join us in Gloverman. They're all going to have to take a PCR. They're going to have to show us the negative test result before they get on the plane. Then when they land, they're going to be games already that day, right? And they're going to have to take a rapid once they land, so that we can get the result before they play. So we're going to be, I think, pretty good with that in terms of safety on the court. Referees are going to have to take a rapid before every day. Again, PCR is obviously better than rapid. It's just a matter of when you can get the results, right? So we're going to have a rapid review today, and fans. You see, fans is a good question. Fans, what we're doing right now is that out of town, anyone's coming from out of LA County, you have to pre-register. We want to make sure it's safe. You want to pre-register, and we're requiring vaccination from those fans to be in our gym. If you're coming from out of town, we want to make sure that we're not burdening ourselves too much. We're going through the teams. We're going to require vaccination, proof of vaccination before attending a game. For people within LA County, where I'm happy to explain a little bit more why, but the people within LA County will either have to be vaccinated or have to show a negative PCR before they attend games.
And then, just to clarify, it would be the PCR before the plane, and then would it be rapid right when you land, or would it be right before the game?
Right when you land. Yeah,
Okay.
You wouldn't get the PCR result in time.
And so how many schools will be attending Gloverman this year?
Oh, see, this is where you should really speak to Coach Coleman. We have, I believe, I feel silly if I'm not right about this, but 10 and 8, I believe. 10 men's teams and 8 women's teams. Yeah.
And then to go back on the COVID testing, so if one of the players were to catch COVID on the plane, then it wouldn't show up on the rapid test. So what would be the point of testing?
Say it again. If someone caught COVID on the plane?
On the plane, then...
Can I recommend the following? I would love for you to reach out to someone from Medical Task Force to ask that question, because we're following their guidance. And I don't mean to like kid you. I hope you've seen that I'm very honest about that. I think it's a matter of probability of that happening in terms of spreads in airplanes and how quickly before the plane they're getting their negative test. So I think it's a matter of probability of that happening. But you can speak to them.
And then we heard from a student from SAR that they might not be attending Gloverman this year because of vaccination issues. Could this be a broader problem to Gloverman?
What are the vaccination issues?
We heard from a student at SCR that they might not be attending because of vaccination problems.
What was the reason that you heard?
Well, they're requiring vaccine at their school.
Oh,
so
that's right. Sorry, I didn't understand what you meant. Yes, originally the SAR has been a wonderful partner, and they've been playing with us throughout all these years, and we love having them. Originally they were, and I think you can speak to them, I don't think this is a secret, they were hesitant, probably for reasons that you're talking about, and originally told us they were, first they weren't sure, and then told us they're likely not going to be in, and then we had filled those spots. You know, we don't have an unlimited ability. We have to have a certain number of teams to make it manageable and to make it a competitive tournament. So we filled that spot, and so the question is now they've reconsidered and really want to continue playing with us. But right now it's just a matter of practically whether we have the spot for them. We love SAR, we really do, and we would love for them to be able to play with us. It's just a matter of just how the logistics worked out on that piece. But I think they've been doing their absolute best to do what's best for their community in terms of safety, in terms of having their team play, and yeah, they've been great. It's just a matter of just the rough timeline of the practical timeline there.
So a follow up. So something you said about the teams that are, how many teams are playing? Will Valley Torah be invited and be allowed to play in this year's Gloverman tournament?
Honestly, I'm not holding back from you. I honestly have to check whether they're on the list. I don't know.
Do you know if they were invited?
I don't. I have to check.
Who invited the teams then?
It was a committee of people. I wasn't at the first meeting when it may have been during COVID. I don't remember. In terms of when the initial list where it's sent out, it could have been even at the end of last year. I'm honestly not sure. I don't remember, but I don't remember the answer to that question. Okay. I can find out very easily for you.
Who is deciding
there
which
are many
teams
people on that team. I mean, you can ask, obviously, Coach Pullman is always going to be front and center in making Gloverman happen. Sarah Emerson would know the answer to that question. There are a lot of people who would. They wouldn't hold back from you. I just don't know the answer.
Okay, perfect.
And then on the topic of co-curriculars,
Yeah.
will vaccination be required for co-curriculars at Shellhevet?
Will vaccination be required for no, our policy for co-curriculars are the same as the school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, are there any schools who have pushed back on the decision to mandate or not mandate vaccines?
School, like other schools here in LA?
Just any other schools, yeah.
Yeah, what? I'm sorry, can you
Just
clarify? Is it
either
Globerman?
regarding Globerman
Is it
or
Globerman related?
Globerman related, yeah.
Yeah, there are some schools that I want to say push back, but had a lot of clarifying questions as to what our protocol would be, and I'm sure some places are a little bit more nervous or cautious than others, and but the fact that we have, and I mean this very seriously, we have a full tournament and a waiting list, is pretty telling that I think people are very comfortable with the process that we're taking. But yeah, people have raised concerns and had questions, and that's something that we're continuing to deal with. Yeah.
Okay, and then one last question, but off the topic of Globerman. So with NBA players, how are the NBA players able to get access to the Shellhevet gym? Do they have to pay, and if so, how much?
Do they have to pay? You'd expect me to be more involved in this process. I think I spoke about this with someone. Again, I'm not the go-to person. I know that you'd feel like I should have all these answers. We have. I think there are basic payments that are made to help us take care of like the costs involved, like let's say security and the use of the building and stuff. But we're not doing it to make money off of them. We're not trying to turn this into a profitable thing. For many people, it's relationships with the people in our building, with Coach Ryan sometimes. We have trainers that we get our students are able to access because of those relationships, and it's something that if we're able to do, why not do, and continue to build those relationships to enhance, to give them opportunities to practice and to enhance our relationships with them. But I don't know the exact costs of the deals, the payments. Yeah.
Yeah, just to refresh your mind, this came up when we had our meeting with the editorial board in August.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I knew that. What did I say then? Was it similar?
Yeah.
I forgot to look it up. I'm happy to look it up. I'm really not holding back. I got COVID that night.
Yes. we all remember.
Yeah. So.
But Noah wasn't there.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joshua Gamson, and I'm the Torah editor. So you discussed the Hashkama Minyan and touched on the davening electives earlier. So I'm going to be asking questions more in depth on davening at Shellhevet.
Great.
So first of all, we saw on Eula's Instagram that you led Hallel there last week on Rosh Chodesh. So why is the head of school at Shellhevet leading Hallel at Eula, and and do you ever plan to lead Hallel at Shellhevet?
What happens when you're head of school?
That's amazing. Do I ever plan to lead? I lead Hallel a lot here at Shellhevet. What you're asking specifically is about that morning thing. So I was asked to lead. There are young professionals in the Beverlywood area that have really started to kind of create community. I've seen it happen in Young Israel of Century City. It's really quite nice. And for the last few months, I believe it's not very old. I think it's quite new. A few people who are not parents or faculty at Eula had this idea to have like a hashkama, not hashkama, to have a Nate's minyan, a Nate's Rosh Chodesh with a really nice hollow. And they announced it. My understanding, it wouldn't make a difference, but my understanding was that it's actually not officially a Eula program, which was never how it was billed. But Eula was very kind enough to, it's right there in town, it's down the block, I just had to walk from me, and they were very kind enough to give us that space. And it was, to be honest, it was very nice. We had a really nice minyan, and then I came here afterwards to teach. So my understanding at the time was that this is a young community thing. I fully support it. I love it. I love the people who are there, the people who are all the Eula people and all the Shah. I loved it. I think it was really nice. My understanding was that Eula was kind enough to give us their space for it. If it were an official Eula program, I'd also be happy to do it. I'm not holding. Why should there be division between schools? It's Hallel. I mean, we should be singing Hallel together. No.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great. But no, I wasn't sure what to be honest, someone said it's Eula. I said, well, I wasn't sure I didn't know there was Eula, but like, what's the difference? So I was really happy to do it. and it was really nice. In terms of doing that program, like doing like that Hallel at Shalhevet, you're putting like Eula right now on the clock. Like you want to ask them, are they going to let? So the answer is, I would love to do it at Shalhevet. I think it's just really that particular program. I imagine it's really hard to do it here because people are in Beverlywood, and I think that's right. Like they just kind of roll out of bed, go to Eula, and then are able to go to work right afterwards. And I think part of being able to do this is the convenience, and Eula Voice is kind of like right there. So I imagine it would be harder to have it here, but I imagine they would be very, other than that logistical issue, I imagine they'd be very happy to do it here. We have a wonderful relationship, which is, I guess, why they gave me the opportunity to. They asked me to lead, and I'd be happy to really do it anywhere with that group of people. It was a really nice, and I'd love to expand it, to be honest. But it was just a nice communal moment of singing Hallel together. So I was grateful that they asked me to do it.
Yeah. And why were the davening electives disbanded this year?
Really good question. Similar to what I was saying before, I love davening electives, and I don't intend for davening electives to be gone for forever. I think we needed a bit of a reset with tefillah. I think we just needed to take a step back, make sure that our main meaning was really strong. It was happening, and I started davening electives, meaning I was very passionate about those and still am. Davening electives started a few years ago when I looked around, and we as a team looked around at tefillah and said, hey, people connect to Hashem in different ways. And tefillah is tefillah, right? We always have to have the halachic piece of tefillah, of course. But the focus of tefillah could be a little different. There could be a girl singing tefillah, which is beautiful. You could have a tefillah that focuses on chassidut and the way that chassidus looks at tefillah. You can have an explanatory tefillah. They're all davening and all this, but I think that's wonderful. I think it's a really beautiful thing. But what ended up happening was that because of Hashkama and Sephardic minyan and all the electives, so then the main minyan of people who just wanted to daven with a regular minyan every day became really diluted. And that might be okay. It doesn't need to be the strongest minyan, but we needed to reset because we felt like it was like that is always going to be the center. The center is the regular minyan, right? And that was no longer the center. So we wanted to take a step back. There were logistical issues also of taking attendance, combining lists. I mean, we did it. We did it for a few years. But combining lists from Hashkama, Sephardic minyan, girl singing tefillah, explanatory, we had Hasidus, and there was one more. What was the other one? I don't remember.
Girl singing, meditation.
Meditative one, that was part of Hasidus. We combined those. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Hasidic meditation.
There's explanatory.
Yeah.
Explanatory, we said, yeah, okay, whatever. But all of those, taking attendance in each one of those, and then combining lists to make sure that we were accounting for all of our students. Again, our goal isn't just accountability. Our goal is for people to have a beautiful tefillah. But we also have to make sure that we're doing our part administratively. So that was really hard also. But ultimately, it was really about just resetting for now. And I think that we'd be very open to, in the future, restarting some of those electives, maybe one by one. Maybe they're not the whole year. Maybe they're almost like mini electives. Like you can do Hasidus for 2 weeks, right? Maybe we'll do things like that. I think those are wonderful things. But at the heart, I just wanted to make sure that we were focusing on tefillah and giving tefillah the proper kavod, respect and honor that it deserves. But ultimately, the goal is always the same, and that is, what can we do to facilitate the most authentic relationship with Hashem?
And why do you feel that it's important for boys to be leading davening, as they have been signed up on lists for mincha to lead?
Do you mean? You don't mean, okay? Now with the clarification, you don't mean boys as opposed to women. You mean
no? Sorry.
Why am I? No, that's all right.
So boys have.
We're all boys.
Yeah.
Asking
So
why are we trying to get? Okay. So
Yeah.
what Josh is referring to
Yes.
is that we have made an effort this year. Great question. I love that you're bringing this up. We made an effort this year to get more boys involved in leading davening and in laning, in Kriyas HaTorah, and laning from the Torah, right? Instead of, there are always a few who are particularly into it, and that's easier because they're always there and we say, hey, can you lead? I think part of our mission as a school is to make sure that we are preparing people to be out, in the real world, and part of that is also within shul life afterwards. We want to make sure that everyone who goes through Shalhevet knows what it means to lead davening. That's a really important value. It's part of, that's kind of like a communal, not only communal norm, but that's like, that's a part of living in communal Jewish life, right? There's also spiritual value to it also, but to say that one of our goals is to make sure that everyone can lead here and say, yeah, I'm going to lead mincha, right? So that when we're in a crowd and someone said, hey, let's daven, who wants to lead? So Shalhevet would say, yeah, I got it, right? And that takes practice, and that takes making sure everyone's got it. So So we some people come in and like know it already, and some people. So we wanted to do that on rotation. The same thing with Kriyas HaTorah. I think it's really important that people you don't have to be someone who's doing it for the rest of your life, but to have that skill to be able to say that I know how to. Many people know from their bar mitzvahs and all, but I know how to read from the Torah, and I'm willing to do it for my community when they need it. You know, there's a concept in Pirkei Avos, right? The Mishnayos, a somewhat well-known concept, but really important to remember. That says, "B'makom she'ein anashim, ishtadel lihiyos ish," which means that in a place where there's no people, so to say, you should strive to be a person, which is often not talking about the way I just said. It makes it sound like, well, you should be a human being. What it really means is that when there's no one else that's stepping up, so you step up. When there's no one else who's stepping up, you be that person. And whether you are going to be leading all the time or not, the fact that you could be that person and says, you know what, no one else is there, I'm going to make sure this happens, I'm going to take care of laning, I'm going to take care of Donning. To be able to have that skill is really important.
Yeah, and ever since the electives were disbanded, including the girls singing minyan, girls don't have the opportunity to lead davening. Will they ever be given that opportunity again?
You mean to have girls singing tefillah?
To have girls leading davening again, as they had.
Girls never led davening here.
But in the minyan of.
And girls singing tefillah, it was a communal thing. There was no leader, I don't think. Right? They were singing tefillah together.
But will girls ever be given that opportunity as boys are?
I'm not entirely sure if you're asking about leading tefillah. So the answer is, we're a halachic institution, and we're an Orthodox institution, so women will not be leading tefillah. But they will, I hope, will continue girls singing tefillah at some point. Again, maybe in that, the iteration which I was saying before, maybe as a full-fledged elective, maybe in terms of like mini semesters of that. And I think it's always important to get women involved in every area. I know this is it's hard. I know that it's hard that it's male-heavy in terms of that's what it is halachically. But there are other ways that we can get women involved in tefillah, which I think are really important. And we've done that in the past. And I think that we need to. I don't know if we're where we're at right now, but it needs to be brought back and not. And that is, I believe it's happening in Hashkama, that women can say the Mishaberach for Chayalei Tzva Haganah Yisrael, right? There are ways in which women can get involved in tefillah. And I don't say that flippantly as if that's the same thing. I understand from at least an emotional perspective it may not be. But there are halachic constraints, none that I'm apologizing for, but I do think it's important that we are sensitive to the fact that we are a community made up of multiple people. And we have to make sure that everyone feels as a part of that community and a part of the leadership of that community. Yeah, it's a little bit limited when it comes to tefillah, but we do our best.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
The corners always, yeah.
Yep. So we're gonna transfer a little bit over to something that came up with. This was a change to the dress code. So this year piercings have been banned for boys, which is something that was not in the previous student handbook. And non-natural colored hair dye has been banned for all genders. So what are the reasons for these changes?
Is it true that piercings were not in the handbook previously?
Explicitly, it was
explicitly.
not. Well,
Fair. Yeah.
Like it was in the student handbook prior to this year. It was not mentioned,
listed.
and there was this year. It says that piercings are banned under the.
So it was
male.
always great question. It was always not allowed, which I'm sure you know. Maybe not, but it was always not allowed. I think the inclusion of it this year was just to be as comprehensive as we could. We were noticing things that weren't in there, and we wanted to include other things. I'm happy to explain the reason for sure. And the other thing, which colored hair was, I don't believe that's true that it's only this year. I believe it was in last year also. Doesn't matter. I'm happy to explain both, but I do believe, maybe I'm wrong. You think I'm wrong?
All I can say is I remember seeing lots of different colored hair last year.
Yeah, but that was a problem of enforcement. Yeah.
At our freshman orientation, we were told that we were allowed to have whatever color hair we want. We just weren't allowed to be student ambassadors if we dyed it.
Really?
Yeah, that was it.
Well, that
If you didn't
that
hear,
is news to me.
If
Okay.
you didn't hear what
So-
Eli, maybe can I
Yeah,
just
for
repeat
sure.
for the
You
mic?
wanna repeat?
What Eli was saying, if you didn't hear, because he's off camera, but
That was
he's-
officially told to you?
we were told on our freshman orientation that would be the year 2019-2020 that boys and girls would be allowed to dye their hair as long, and
So-
they just would not be able to represent the school as like a student ambassador.
Okay. Well, I have some issues with creating that sort of dichotomy, but I'm not going to speak on the past because I honestly don't know. This is news to me. But can I explain what our current
Yeah,
current
definitely.
policy is? So so there are a few issues that whenever we deal with dress, I think a lot of people like to point. I have to consider both social aspects of the school and also the halachic aspects of the school. That's within my purview, and that's what we have to figure out. A lot of people point to, for example, at least for men, let's say piercings for men, right? They point to a halachic concept called beged isha, that's not the way that men generally dress. I actually do not think that is the halachic consideration here, for a few reasons, and I'm happy to explain why. There are men in the world who wear earrings, and that's not a crazy thing. That would not fall under the problem of beged isha. But there are some other things that I think are really important. We try to create an environment that is a Torah environment, and that speaks to the Torah's values and the halachic values, and also creates an environment that is a professional environment as well. I think that the issue that we're talking about here, and I'm happy to learn, and perhaps anyone who's listening to this or watching this stream, I'm happy. I see the Dodgers game is getting close, so you're going to start losing people soon. But I'm happy to learn this. But there's if you look at the Shulchan Aruch in your Deya, Siman Kuf Ayin Ches. So it talks about something called chukas akum, something that's very misunderstood, I think. Chukas akum means things that are the way of non-Jews, and specifically idolaters, right? And we don't do things that are right. That is a real halachic. So if there's something that we know that was done in the practice of idolatry, we don't do that. And I think the reason is probably pretty clear, right? There are a lot of exceptions. Some people go a little bit, very far with this. But I think there's another category of things that people don't know that really fits into this. And this is what the Ramah says right there in Kavayin Ches. And he quotes the Chuvas Marik. And what he says is that the concept of chukas akum is not just not replicating the practices of idolaters, because how practical is that, right? We don't really know many practices of idolaters that we'd be like, oh, that's what I'm doing, right? But it's also about living with certain values of what are Jewish values, like not adopting values of others, right? Right? And I don't mean to say it so negatively. It's really about staying true to Jewish values.
Yeah.
And one of those, he says, chukas akum is about tznius. Tznius versus pritus, which are the inverse of each other. So I think a lot of times we talk about the concept of tznius, which is modesty, as a concept of like, well, you don't want to show too much skin. You want to be appropriate. You want to. That is not really what being tsanua means, right? The concept of tznius is actually about the Jewish value of not always having the spotlight on you, not always being, look at me, right? There's an element of being part of a community and being tsanua about that, about saying, this is who I am. I know exactly who I am. I'm proud of who I am. I want to look nice. I want to dress nicely. You know that. I hope you feel. You look at me and I like to dress nicely. I think it's important to dress nicely, right? But the Jewish value of tznius means that it's not always about, hey, look at me, right? I think it's a really important value. And that's what the Ramah says is part of actually chukas akum when we talk about those different things. And I think that there are certain things that are not all that, and it's a very subjective line, right? It's a very subjective line. There's certain things in our community that are not generally accepted. That doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they're not accepted in our community. So you look around in the Orthodox shuls, you're not going to have men wearing earrings, usually, right? And the same thing with hair color. Loud hair color. And I think the exact word, that dyeing your hair in a color that is not considered natural, right? That's the problem, right? Usually those things attract attention. That is not the norm. It doesn't mean it's not allowed. It doesn't mean that it is not something that is bad, that it's something that's bad, but it's usually not the norm in the Orthodox community. And that means that usually when you see those in schools, it usually kind of shines a spotlight and says, hey, look at me. This is like, I have bright, I'm not thinking of any particular person, I promise you this. I have bright pink hair. I have bright, it's fine, there's nothing bad about that, but it's not the value that we want to be promoting in high school. The value we want to be promoting is the attention. It doesn't need to be that sort of spotlight. The concept of tsanua, of saying, I want to dress nicely, I want to be, it's a fine line, but that it's not always about me. So here's the thing. What we could do, and what many schools in the country do, are say absolutely no to all of these things, right? I wrote a letter to our community a few weeks ago about hair length. I don't know if you saw this, right? Hair length for men, right? We allow. I've never told a student that they have to cut their hair. I've never done it. The high school that I went to did. The high school that I used to work at did. The high school it's a very common thing throughout high schools in the country that boys in high school have to have a short haircut. I don't believe that's true. And I explained in the newsletter why. I think there's a value to be able to take ourselves and to have a little bit self-expression, to be ourselves and to feel comfortable in our own skin, and that means you want to grow your hair out a little bit, okay? I think it's a fine, right? That's something that many places don't allow. And it's something that I think we allow. And I think it's important that we allow, right? We allow dyeing hair, but to a natural color. Why? Because I think that this is a fine line. We want to make sure that there's room for self-expression. There's room for being true to yourself, feeling comfortable with who you are, feeling good about yourself. Really important values, right? But also not kind of stepping over that Jewish value of saying that I'm still tzanua. Does not mean skirt length. It does not mean all the things that we associate with tzanua. Those can be later manifestations, expressions of it. But it means, am I living my life in a way that it's not all about me, it's not the spotlight on me, it's not about, take a look. And I think I'm not even talking about dress. Tznius is not a dress concept. It applies that being tzanua is the way we hold ourselves. Be proud of who you are. Be comfortable with who you are. But it's not only about you. You make room for others. That's not like a 21st century. That is tznius. Make room for others. And I think that value, I'm not arguing that anyone who has a loud hair color is not making room for others. I'm not arguing that a man who has an earring is not making room for others. But I'm saying the values that they generally promote are things that we want to have conversations about. So that's the reason. It's always, I'll just say one more thing. I know these answers are long. It's always a bit of it's hard when we are thoughtful. Because it would be much easier to say, as I was saying before, just don't allow anything. And then you probably wouldn't be wondering why you're allowed to dye your hair a random, like a color. If your hair is blonde, you can dye it brown. But you're not allowed to dye it pink. But men are allowed to grow their hair out long, but they're not allowed to wear earrings. Like, that's confusing, right? And maybe I have to do a better job communicating these things. It would be much easier not to have that nuance. It would be much easier to say, no changes, men have short hair, no colors by anyone, no piercings, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's true to who we are. And I think that sometimes the line is annoying and you can't figure it out. But I think that's what we're talking about here. I think we're talking about that broader sense of what chukas akum means in terms of being tzanua, saying that these are the Jewish values that we think are important. Be great, be yourself, feel proud of it, but let's not cross the line of what I think the values that tznius tries to promote.
So you mentioned tzanua and attracting attention, but these students, some that dye their hair or would want to get a piercing, aren't like trying to attract attention, but rather are trying to like express gender identity or non-identity. And it's an important part of like growing up for all teens, and it is a little different for LGBTQ teens. So what's your response to them? How do you want to make room for them in that response? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think part of making rules is that you can't always account for intention. Right? I can't always say that because of the letter, the spirit of the law is not really aligned in this case. So there will be people for whom it's true that we're not dyeing our hair for that reason, and maybe it's true for most. I think that people know, people see, I think it is something that creates kind of a conversation, which is part of the reason that we think about it thoughtfully and say this is something that it would be okay and this is something that wouldn't. But when it comes specifically to gender identity, that's a more complex question. We've had gender questions when it comes to halacha. I think this is an area that I think all schools are going to be dealing with, and if they haven't already, very, very soon. It's the question of someone who identifies with the gender that is not the gender they were born in, and whether they can wear the clothing of what's in our dress code, at least of the gender with which they identify, right? And that's a really important question, and I've gotten that question before, and I hope, sensitive conversations with those students, and I speak to our halachic authority, our posek, and I actually think that we've been very, I can't say this in my mind, but we have to speak to those students. I think we've been understanding. And I think there are certain things that we've allowed to create exceptions for, and we have. And there are certain situations in which it was a little bit more difficult. So when this particular situation has to do with the LGBTQ community and making sure that they feel like they are part of this community and have space in this community and are loved by the community and are accepted into Orthodoxy and have a place in the Torah and which is obviously our values, right? That is something that we so deeply believe, that no one should feel ostracized or feel like they're not part of it, or chas v'shalom be put down because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. It's crazy that I even need to say that. But if that's part of the conversation, then we'll deal with it separately, and we'll have a one-on-one conversation. We'll deal with, and we'll speak to the people we need to speak to, and we'll deal with that on a one-on-one basis, and we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So last year in an interview with then editor-in-chief Molly Litvack about new COVID schedules, when schedules were coming out and being changed often due to different plans on campus, you said that if there was not a time crunch, that you thought it could have been brought to town hall for student input or discussion. So I'm going to kind of update that question and make it a little more general toward the Just community. But excluding curriculum, secular and Jewish law, and safety issues, what kinds of things do you think students have a right to vote on?
So you're excluding
curriculum, secular and Jewish law, and safety issues, what kinds of things do you think students have a right to vote on? Or if not have a right, then what would benefit them from having the opportunity to vote on?
I would extend the curricular one to general pedagogy.
Yeah.
And then my answer is anything outside of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
So outside, what do you think, for any examples of something you, that would encompass outside that you think that students have a right to vote on?
The schedule is actually a good example, and I think we did bring it to the community, didn't we? We made changes based on student input. It wasn't a vote, I don't think, but we did bring it. Didn't we bring it to the Just community?
I don't think the student schedule last year was ever brought to the Just community for discussion.
Well,
or town hall.
Okay, great. Maybe that's an example of something that should have been, and
Yeah.
it was true that we were in a time crunch, obviously. And by the way, I'm very open. I try to be very self-reflective. It could be, because this is the second time that I'm saying this, that because of the timing we didn't bring the... Maybe we have to be more thoughtful about that. Maybe we have to kind of look in the mirror and say, maybe that's an excuse at this point. I don't intend for it to be. I don't think it is. But the schedule... I think it could have been something that was brought to adjustment. I have to check. I think after the first iteration, we did do something with their grade. I think we met with each grade, or we met with representatives. I think we did. And that was part of creating the new, I think, better schedule. But your point is well taken. Could that have been from the very outset part of a Just community conversation? Probably. There are some pedagogical pieces there.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of what creates the best learning, right? That's a really important question. But I don't think that's beyond the purview of the Just community. I think that could have been discussed.
Is there anything else? I asked, what kinds of things do you think students have a right to vote on?
It's hard for me to give categories like that. I mean, I love previous things we voted on. That's the only thing I can think of. I love our Friday schedule. I actually don't love our Friday schedule. I wish we had lunch on Friday. I loved it, but I deeply respect the choice of the Just community, and that's why we haven't changed it. In fact, it came up recently. Here's a great example. It came up recently because of a scheduling thing that someone suggested. Someone on our administrative team said, why don't we just extend our schedule on Friday to 1:15? To which I believe it was me who said, and it probably was others also, it said, well, we can't really do that without going to the Just community, because that's why the schedule is what it is right now.
Yeah.
So something like that. And that's related to the schedule, and that's why I think it's probably... I love the tzitzis thing that we did a few years ago. The change in policy. I think all those things. Now, you could argue that the tzitzis thing was also a pedagogical, but I don't know. And it could be Jewish law, but wearing a collar isn't really Jewish law. You know what I'm saying? So, I was very pro that going to vote, and it did. But it's hard for me to give general categories. If you asked, I could maybe think about it. Give you an off the cuff. If you ask certain categories,
So do you agree with Dr. Jerry Friedman's view that having students decide as many things as possible is an important tool in their moral development?
I think that students involved in the conversation as much as possible is an important tool in student development, and often that manifests itself in making decisions. I speak with Dr. Friedman about this even now regularly. I mean, I meet with him. I'm not saying it's every day, but I meet with him and talk about this. I think he probably has a more expansive view of what would be in the purview of students, but we are very much aligned with the values and on almost all of those pieces, and he knows that. I mean, we have open conversations about this. So there are certain things that we might disagree. I think back in the day, you can speak to. There was a vote on whether students would be. This is many years ago, in which boys could wear hats instead of kippot. Is that right? He always gives that example. It was before your time. So it was a long time ago, right? So I'm thinking about that now. Like, would I allow that? I don't think so. I don't think I would allow baseball caps I don't think I would approve that decision because I think it gets too much to the heart of who we are. The other side of it is that, and I told him that, the other side is that, well, part of bringing it to the just community is explaining why it's so difficult and why it's not a good idea, and then kind of leaving it in their hands. So I hear we kind of disagree with that piece, but I agree fundamentally with using the just community and giving the students a voice whenever we can. I really do believe in that.
And lastly, on this topic, if there's a policy you'd like to see changed, so would you ask the Fairness Committee to make a new rule? Would you bring it to Town Hall? Would you just institute the policy with no outside consultation? Like, what would your steps be?
It really depends on what the policy would be. It's hard for me to answer.
If it was a policy that you viewed like could be changed by students, what would the what
would it be?
Like, what steps would you?
I would go back to the Constitution that was really recently rewritten. I've done this recently. Or I'd go back to the Constitution. I would read the bylaws. I'd read what the process is to refresh, and then I think I'd just go through that process. I would follow. I'd create the proposal. We'd create the committee with the Judiciary Committee. I don't remember exactly what the names are, and we'd go through that regular process.
Yeah, the Judicial Review Subcommittee.
Judicial Review Subcommittee, exactly, and go through that process of having the stakeholders from a different group, having something that goes to the next stage by unanimous approval, and all that whole thing, and then eventually bring it to Town Hall. Yeah.
Okay, Juliet.
Yeah, I'll take the mic. Kind of connecting to Town Hall just because it's like showing a variety of perspectives. Do you feel a responsibility as head of school to provide students with a diversity of opinions or perspectives related to the Middle East? Would you ever consider hosting a speaker for J Street or who is a Palestinian American?
It's a really great question. I am very committed to, I think it's really important, really, really important for all of our students. From the most Zionistic and not even Zionistic, from the most, it's hard to say, from the different political spectrum of Zionism to hear and understand multiple perspectives on the Israel situation. I put my money where my mouth is. I went, not that this is to say that this is the be-all end-all, but I've gone on programs in which I've actually visited the West Bank and heard from Palestinian speakers and done my best, knowing that I'm not in that world, to understand it, to understand the other perspective. I really believe that's important for our Zionism. And this is probably needless to say, as you can see from all of my, I'm a staunch Zionist. But I think that nuance and understanding and appreciation of a multiplicity of perspective is really, really important. That having been said, I think there's a difference in the educational parts of our class, like the educational classroom, versus what our school stands for. We are an avowedly Zionist school. We are aligned with AIPAC in terms of our hashkafa. And then in the classroom, we are willing to have conversations that are a little bit more nuanced. And by the way, that's not like a secret. All of our students experience that, right? It's not like a few students are like getting that. All of our students in 11th grade experience that. But as a school, what we support and what we bring in are things that are more aligned with the hashkafa of us being that let's say AIPAC aligned school for now. Would we bring in other speakers? So the answer is it depends. It depends on what the purpose is, right? I think it is important to have a balance of perspective. I wouldn't bring in just like a J Street speaker to our school as a speaker. I think I would be open to having someone who had those views, probably together with someone, maybe an AIPAC person, in our classroom itself, so that you understand those views. But as a school, that is not aligned with our values, and therefore, I'm not saying J Street, I'm saying, but people who are not aligned with our values, I would not bring them in to address our students as a whole. But I do think, the difference is education. Someone asked me once whether I would hang up a map that clearly demarcated the green line, that showed like this is the West Bank and this is Gaza and it's not part of it, right? That clearly showed the green line. Would I hang up a map like that? And what I said is, I would hang up that map in our Israel classroom. I would not hang up that map in our hallways. And I don't know if that was like one example. I don't know. But I think it's really important. And I hope, listen, people at home might be listening to this and say, well, you're not really committed to this if you won't bring in J. I think there's also, it's important to understand that there's there are things that we stand for, and those things are really important. And to start conversations around those things in an educational setting is very different than almost doing what we always call like bumper sticker politics, in which we bring people in to say something that's like really controversial or really, that's not what our goal is, right? Our goal is to delve into real conversations, and those happens, the arena for that is the classroom. And I'm not saying we'd bring up anyone for classroom either, to be honest. I wouldn't say that we'd bring, why don't we bring in like I don't know, sorry. Why don't we bring in like a Palestinian speaker randomly just to talk about like Islam and talk? Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. I'd have to think about it. We've actually brought in, Rabbi Stein has brought in, we've had people who are experts in Islam or people who are, at least via Zoom, people, Palestinians, to understand that perspective within the context. I mean, it just has to be done thoughtfully. So we have no blanket answer, but I think the most important thing is to distinguish between what we do as a school and what our views are, and then the process of education to strengthen our Zionism. Yeah.
So a couple of follow-up, like you mentioned, and obviously like it's clear that like a big like value of Shalhevet is Zionism, but there are ways, I guess, to host people in a way where it wouldn't be going against that value. Like Harkham Hill Hebrew Academy just had an event where they had, to my understanding, I could be portraying it wrong, but a Palestinian come in and teach the kids like we could be peaceful with each other, like you shouldn't like be like intimidated always, and like we can work together, and that seems like a very positive message as opposed to one that's anti.
I see. When you started with the example of J Street, I assumed the purpose was a particular the purpose of a visit like that is to kind of express the opinions and to promote the opinions of a particular organization or a particular theology or view of the world. If we're talking about a different purpose, and that is, we're not going to talk about theology. We're not going to talk about even the politics of the conflict, but we're going to talk about getting to know you so that I treat you as a human being. Maybe I'd consider that differently. It also matters, the organization they're a part of, right? So there are wonderful organizations in the world that do this. There are some very Zionistic organizations that do it, and there are less, but there are very, even right-wing Zionistic organizations who do this, who bring out Palestinian speakers, and within the context of the goal is to kind of build bridges. That's a conversation I'm willing to have. I'd have to understand the nuance of it and what the values are of that institution or that organization, but that's a little bit different than discussing the issues themselves, which again, the arena for that is the classroom. But yeah, I'm not opposed to that, and I think it's important to frame those things properly, but yeah.
Right. And then also, like, kind of based off of that, let's say, like, Shalhevet didn't officially bring in someone, and obviously it's, like, a positive mindset and everything, but a school club brought in someone to kind of address issues of, like, Israel and Palestine and bringing them together, or Palestinians or anything of that. Would Shalhevet be against that?
We actually have a written up, I don't know if it's called a charter, but we actually have a set of guidelines for speakers for clubs. I have to refresh myself on it, to be honest. I was part of, I believe, putting it together. But part of it is that the speaker cannot express any values that are opposed to our values. Doesn't mean they can't express different values, but values that are opposed to our values for clubs would also be under the general, meaning it's still our school and we're still promoting it and still under our name. So I believe those. I believe that for a club, it's a little bit different than what we would do. I think the rules are a little bit different than what we would do for the school in general, but still is under the general guideline of this needs to be aligned or not against our values. And I need to double check what that is.
Right, for sure. I'm going to pass the mic to Liad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Someone bring Rabbi Block a glass of water.
No, I'm all right. I still have cold coffee, which is good.
You want some coffee still?
No, yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm okay. Thank you.
We're nearing the end.
Great. I've been enjoying myself. This is nice. This is nice. If my kids are watching, hey guys, I miss you a lot. Right,
Any more shout-outs?
I mean, my wife. All of my colleagues here at Shalhevet, thinking of you guys. I don't know. Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty good segue into our next topic, speaking of faculty at Shalhevet. So there have been a great increase in turnover in the last 2 years compared to recent years before, and it seems to be also true in administration. So over the last 15 months, Shalhevet has lost 5 women in administration. college counseling director Aviva Walls, admissions director Natalie Weiss, ed support director Ashley Evans, guidance counselor Esther Abiba, as well as Miss Wilner. Sorry, I said administration just in staff. Miss Wilner wasn't
That's
in
all right,
administration.
yeah.
And that's not counting also Yotzet Halacha Atara Siegel, who made
Who's
Aliyah.
here, who's in town right now.
Yes, I
Yeah.
saw her. And also another administration person that recently left was Nachum Joel. At the same time, teachers have left, including Miss Nagel, Dr. Walton, Mrs. Hammett, Miss Wilner, who I mentioned, Mr. Diamond. Miss Croncoli is in Scottsdale, which
I
is
know who
kind
left. You
of
don't have to go
here.
no.
And Mr. Saint Germain also left
Yeah.
as recently as last week. So 3 of these, Dr. Evans, Mr. Viva, and Mr. Saint Germain, left after the school year had started.
Right.
So I know all of this, and of course I know you can't comment on individual cases, but it raises various questions in the community, which we'd like to give you a chance to answer. So first of all, whatever the specific reasons are in each case, as well as like people in the community are wondering if there's something going on, what would you like to say to that?
Is there something going on? I don't think so. No, this is a very fair question. Until the very end there, I thought it was a very fair question. I'll tell you, it's absolutely true that there's been turnover. People at home might be scared with that long list. This is over a time. It wasn't like yesterday that this happened. I think there are a lot of reasons for turnover in a school. A lot of those people, I think it's worthwhile. It is a real value of ours, and I say this to people as we sign contracts for like new faculty, is that we want to invest in you. We want to invest in you. Sometimes that means they want to start a new, like an organization or something, and we invest kind of like seed money with them, we partner with them. Sometimes it means giving them PD opportunities, right? Sometimes it means helping them get further degrees in their education. Like, we really want to invest in our teachers. And we pride ourselves, and this has been true for a little while, we pride ourselves in saying that we really believe that we are investing in our teachers in a way that make them really valuable and desirable in the world of education. So there are some people who actually leave to get greater positions. Ms. Walls is the head of school on the East Coast, right? And Nachum Joel is the executive or the COO at Yavne, right? And Ms. Hamitz, who, like, these are all so beloved people. Ms. Hamitz is the dean of students in Berman. And so they're leaving for these positions that are like just wonderful opportunities. Ms. Wilner is the associate director of admissions at Yeshiva University, right? So people are leaving now. And I believe that's part of this. I would never say that is the only thing. Of course that's not true, but that is a big part of this. And I think it's important to notice that. People aren't just leaving, or many people aren't just leaving. They're going for positions that are higher positions, that are greater opportunities, that for whatever reason we couldn't offer in that moment, but they're really grateful to Shalhavet for kind of giving them the platform to develop themselves in a way that would make them eligible for those new positions. There are some other people that for whatever reason, it didn't work out, and I think that there are some elements, especially the recent ones. You mentioned a few people recently in the last summer, and the world of employers and employees right now. Sure, if you Google this, a lot of stuff will come up. I'm taking a risk there, but I think it's true. That COVID burnout is a very big deal right now in institutions. I've been really curious and interested in figuring out what that means. But there's something that is creating a bit more of a stressor on people in all fields, certainly in schools. I know it's true of all my colleagues. I'm on so many listservs in which people are like, well, we're missing a teacher here, or someone just left here, like, what can we do? So I think this is happening in general. I think that there's a feeling of COVID burnout where people are, for whatever reason, reevaluating what they want to be doing or where they want to be and how much time they're spending with their family, and they make decisions that reflect those considerations. At the same time, I think it would be really foolish if I stood here and defended every single loss or every single departure by saying, well, they went for a better job somewhere else, and that person was COVID burnout. It's not us, and that person was. I think that when these things happen, it is important that I kind of look on the inside. I kind of look in the mirror and say, is it something that we're doing here? Is it something? I've started a process of connecting with faculty and really kind of building that up and having a conversation, listening to faculty. And my answer is, I don't think that's why people are leaving. I don't think there's, I think you said something going on. No, I don't think there's something going on, but it gives me a wonderful opportunity to turn to my faculty and say, hey, let's talk. What can we be doing better? How can we be supporting you better? How can you ensure that during, whether it's us, because of us or not, maybe it's just the world going through COVID, but still, how can we support you through it? And how can we make sure that your satisfaction, our faculty is the greatest faculty. Their commitment to you and to the values of the institution is astounding, and it is absolutely unparalleled. It is remarkable when you speak to the faculty and the staff of this institution, of this school. They're so dedicated to you, and they so deeply believe in what they're doing. And that's really special. And I want to make sure that from an administrative perspective, we're taking care of them also, that they feel like they're supported and they feel like they're so valued, because they are. Again, I'm not saying that's the reason that people left. People leave because of their own things, and there could be something here. It really is, everyone, it's funny, the common denominator is that they work at Shalhevet. Everyone has their own stories, everyone has their own lives, and they have all different considerations. But I think it's really important, from my perspective, not to pretend that we can't necessarily do better in making sure that we are continuing to develop and love and care for all of the amazing people that make this institution what it is. So I don't have a better answer than that. I'll tell you that I take it seriously. I can tell you that I think I'm not down about it. Meaning I think that we have an amazing school, and all of the educators we're filling. I think beautifully. Mr. West was done a remarkable job. We're all. What filling sounds like so wrong, as if we're filling a hole. We're continuing to build. Turnover is a very common thing. There have been a few more. Turnover is a very common thing. It's an ability to reevaluate and say, okay, what are our values? How do we get the right people on the bus, to use Jim Collins' terminology, and making sure that this is the greatest place in the world. And I'm really proud of that. So I'm very positive. I'm very optimistic about this. But I always use things as an opportunity to kind of look in the mirror and be reflective. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, well, I'm going to give it over to Liat for a few more questions on this topic.
Okay. So what is the policy around teachers leaving Shalhevet, considering 3 teachers left after the start of the school year? So is this
3
allowed under
teachers
their
left
contracts?
At the start. You mean including the summer?
More
Okay, it
so
doesn't matter,
once
that's
the
a
year
detail.
actually began, because it was a few days in.
Ashley Esther and Saint Germain.
Okay, that's why I was asking this summer. I was considering this. Okay, fine, no worries. What is the policy? Our policy is that we want our teachers to stay. There's no policy. The policy is that we have a partnership, and we really want our teachers to, to give our students a great opportunity. We want our teachers, if they're committing to us to teach another year, we would love for them to follow through with that. Not because we're angry if they don't, but because our students are often the ones to lose, if teachers leave in the middle. So we love and we hope and we expect that when teachers kind of agree to work on that, they're going to stay. But it's their prerogative to leave. If something else comes up, a better opportunity comes up, if for whatever reason, whatever it is, there's nothing holding them back from doing that, other than the sense of community that we have, that I hope keeps the vast majority of people here all the time. But certainly if something comes up in the middle of the year, it happens. It happens that teachers leave in all schools and at Shalhevet, and before this year also. It happens that they leave in the middle of the year. What keeps them here is our students. What keeps them there is that commitment to the relationship. Yeah.
So just for clarification, is this allowed under their contracts?
See, this is outside of my purview in terms of like the legal pieces. My understanding is that contracts do nothing to require someone to work somewhere. Contracts ensure that if the conditions are met by the employer, then the employee gives the compensation that was agreed upon. And then you have all details about how that works. But there's nothing in a contract that would ever force someone to work. That sounds strange. Yeah.
Yes. So Yoetzet Atara Siegel and Miss Wilner were both very well-educated female leaders and role models for girls on faculty.
Yes.
And so now there are few full-time female Judaic studies role models on campus. What, if any, plans are there regarding hiring more female Judaic teachers at Shalhevet?
Top priority. It's something that I've been thinking about. By the way, even before, Yoetzet, these are gems, obviously. Yoetzet Siegel, we knew that she made Aliyah a few years ago. But this was always the year in which we were going to make sure that we were investing in that area of the school. We have wonderful female educators, but and on the Judaic side, but absolutely investing more in that, specifically in leadership there, is a top priority. So I hope that you can follow up with me. However long that is, it's not going. We're working for the 22 my gosh, I'm already talking about this. I'm working for the 22-23 year, so I hope you will follow up with me, and kind of, I don't want to say hold accountable, but really kind of check in. You said, hey, this is a priority for you. Rabbi Block, you said this is a top priority. What's the deal? Yeah, please do follow up, because it really is. It's not like lip service. This is a top priority.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that Esther Abibo has left the school and Gabby Marcus is the only guidance counselor,
Yes.
are you at all concerned that having Gabby Marcus as both the only remaining counselor and a teacher who gives grades diminishes her effect working on one-on-one
So
with students?
it's a great question. I haven't found that latter part is really interesting. We always consider those things. We haven't seen that as like almost like a conflict of interest. We haven't seen that, and we talked about it with her before, and she wasn't concerned with her experience in the position. So that we haven't seen. If it becomes a conflict of interest, obviously we wouldn't want to do that. So we'll figure it out. So I'll just put the teaching piece aside. We are actively hiring a second guidance counselor to have that same kind of relationship where we have a one full-time and one part-time person. So we're almost Gabby is now the primary counselor, and we're looking for someone to, I guess, take over Gabby's role, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'll monitor the teaching situation. I don't see that being an issue, but if that's something that we hear or something that you hear and you want to bring to my attention, I would certainly want to know about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now going more into about art at Shalhevet. So will the Israeli sticker wall on the second floor be permanent, or is it going to be replaced with something more beautiful or serious?
What are you trying to say about the sticker wall? You don't think it's beautiful or serious?
Well, before it had the Just Community Constitution and the
No, you don't have to defend
painting.
the question. I'm with you. I think my real answer is that I just don't think all the Just Community diehards are going to go crazy at me right now. The placement of what was on that wall just hasn't been the highest priority for me. Even though I know exactly. The Constitution is the highest priority, and the Just Community is. But the placement of that wall, it was removed. I still don't know. Someone asked me this question, and I know there was an article on it. I really don't know who made the decision to move it. It wasn't like this, guys, let's slowly phase out the Just Community and move away the Constitution. No, that never happened. I think we needed a wall to show some ruach during Yom Ha'atzmaut, and so we used that wall for it. What will we do with that wall? I don't know, but I think it's going to be a conversation. For better or for worse, I love for people to see that wall. I think it's pretty cool. It has all the things that we love about Israel on stickers in the shape of the state of Israel, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, it's not the most gorgeous thing that could be on that wall. And it may not even be we have to figure it out. So this is usually the time of year that we think about these things, mainly because education we had to stop worrying about that crazy rush, right? We're also in an admission season, to be perfectly frank, and we always think about, hey, how does our building look? It's funny. Schools do things around admission season, and I think the general feeling is that there's cynicism around it, like, oh, you're only doing that for like the prospective students. I hope the school doesn't feel that. I hope our students don't feel that way. I actually use that opportunity to say, what vision or what message are we delivering to our community, right? And the great test of that, the ultimate test, is to look at people who haven't yet experienced it. And those are our prospective families and prospective students. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to take a step back and say, I'm not doing this only so that you have this weird impression of us that isn't true. Of course not. But admission season is a wonderful time to kind of reevaluate things and saying, hey, who are we and what are we conveying to the world, to people who are less biased because they're not in it every day. So this is the time of year that we think about those things. And I'm happy. I assume we'll be talking about that soon.
Yeah, and why not put the Constitution back on the second floor?
We might.
Okay.
Yeah. I promise you, I'm not against it. I at all.
Okay, and I will pass it on to.
Yeah, I'm just following up quickly about something about the staffing thing that you were talking about with Liad. So there has not. You mentioned that you are currently hiring for the counseling department. Is there any plans to hire a replacement for Natalie Weiss?
For admissions?
In admissions, as director of admissions.
Right now, we have a great team of people working on it that's headed by Cheryl Wolf.
Yeah.
Johnny has also taken a big role in admissions. We have a wonderful team. Rabbi Saidi, Jasmine, there are a lot of people who are, myself, a lot of people working on it. We have a good thing going right now. Meaning there's it's just a good system. So right now we're not actively we're not looking for that. I think the process has been efficient and successful so far. But as true in all situations, I'll keep my finger on that pulse, and if we feel like that's a good direction to go in, I'm happy to. But I don't say that. I say that just in the sense that that's true for every position. I'll always reconsider. But right now, I think we're in a space that I'm grateful to the team for doing excellent work with it, for Cheryl for taking lead, and that's where we're at right now.
Okay. And then just one more easy question for you. What plans are there around for Shalhevet's sex education program?
Save the best for last.
Oh wait, there's one more after this.
That's also
There
easy.
you go.
No, actually, this is pretty easy. What are our plans? A few years ago, I sat down with a female colleague, and we started mapping out our Jewish sexual ethics course. We always did something for seniors, always like a one-day thing. Like we just had a conversation with seniors, separate gender, and we wanted to really bring it to the rest of the community, because I really do think that it's like we're not hiding it. It's not like ninth graders don't know that are not involved in sexuality. And when I say that, I mean are thinking about it. Like I don't know what even involved means, but like let's not play games to think that like no one's thinking about it until they're a senior, right? Of course not. So I think it's really important to start talking about the Torah's values. There's absolutely nothing to be embarrassed about. There's nothing to pretend. The Torah talks about sexuality, and we should be having those conversations in the developmentally appropriate age, for students. So we wanted to create a Torah-centered Jewish sexual ethics course that was a four-year curriculum. Not talking about the heavy things in ninth grade. Yeah, remember this? Not talking about the heavy things in ninth grade, but start talking about things in ninth grade, like, for example, body image and the concepts of tznius, which are the foundations of much heavier conversations in later grades. And that concept, I think, is a wonderful thing. We were slowed down by a few things. One of them was actually COVID, but we actually implemented it. Was it last year or 2 years ago? I don't remember. We started implementing an iteration of it, which is that it wasn't just one class for seniors, but it was a whole series of classes for seniors, which was already starting to expand it beyond that one class, right? That had a very thoughtful curriculum and a scope and sequence and all of that. And the goal is to continue that, and then to eventually tap into implement it for other grades as well, again, in a developmentally appropriate way, so that we're building upon really important Torah values centered around Kedusha, holiness, relationships, the nature of self-image, body image, and all of that, and then how they play out in the world of sexuality. I think it's really silly if schools pretend that this isn't a question or isn't on people's minds, or that there aren't, it doesn't apply yet. At Shalhevet, and I hope it's true in more institutions, we don't pretend about those things. Like, we have real conversations about what is and what isn't, and we talk to our students in a real way and in an appropriate way. But we don't pretend that that things don't exist. So we have very honest conversations with our students, again, in an appropriate way, but in a way that prepares them to be moral, committed, halakhically observant, and good people in all areas, including sexuality. Yeah.
And then for the final question, most important of the day, which team will you be rooting for in the MLB playoffs?
This is a great question. Can I say something? For real?
Of course.
So I'm a Mets fan, and it's very hard for me to root for. Some people get like really into when your team isn't into it, you go for another team. My first love is the Mets. My second, but it's really like I have like an unhealthy love for the Mets. But also, my second love is baseball. I love good baseball games. I love it. I don't really care who wins, but I also do a little bit. So, I can't say what I really feel. I haven't yet gotten over my, let's say, lack of love for the Dodgers. So I know what I'm saying is very dangerous. I have found over the last years, this is really true. I have found that over the last years, I have started to appreciate teams that people who I really care about appreciate. I haven't been able to kick it yet with the Dodgers, even though so many people in my life who I care about love the Dodgers. But I used to really, 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 hate's a strong word, but I really used to hate the Braves, because the Mets and the Braves were like in a division. And so I really, the whole tomahawk thing and I just, what?
You and Rabbi Schwartzberg probably.
Okay, so this is my point, and I have come to appreciate the Braves much more because I see how much Rabbi Schwartzberg loves them, and I really love Rabbi Schwartzberg. And I've come to be okay with the Braves, so I'm kind of rooting for the Braves right now. I also love the Red Sox because they mutually hate the Yankees with the Mets fans also. So I'm always a bit of a and Rabbi Tzaidi's a Red Sox, but I don't really have an answer, but my logic is inconsistent because there are so many people who I love who are Dodgers fans. I haven't been able to kick that one yet. I don't hate them. I just haven't been able to root for them yet. But again, I just want good baseball. And if you're really asking me, I haven't really thought. I have to do a cheshbon nefesh on that. I want the Braves to do well for Rabbi Schwartzberg, but I actually don't want them to win because that's like too close to home. You know what I mean? Like they're in the same division as the Mets. I don't know. I guess let's go Red Sox. I'm not sure.
What are your thoughts on the Astros? You know, we have an Astros fan here.
I have trouble with the Astros for the reason that the America has trouble with the Astros. I like Dusty Baker. I think Dusty Baker is a really upstanding guy. I think he was the best hire for that team because he brought back some legitimacy to the organization. But I have a real trouble with the Astros. My good friend Noe, you guys know Noe, he's a big Astros fan, but I can't bring myself to root for the Astros at all. And Mr. Westlow is a Giants fan. This is hard. You guys don't know that? Oh my goodness! I just outed Mr. Westlow.
Everything you said tonight, I think that's the biggest.
That's
news
the craziest thing. Mr. Westlow is a serious Giants fan. This is a big problem right now. The bottom line is, forget everything I said. I just want good baseball.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I never do this, but since you're talking about it, do you think that last night's home runs that got stopped by the wind were an act of God?
He didn't
Oh, really? So we had. It's a great
If you
question.
didn't hear what Mrs. Keene said, she's also off camera. She said if Rabbi Block thought that last night's stopped home runs were an act of God, that didn't make its way over because of the wind.
Are you asking me really theologically?
Whatever way you want to answer it is fine. But that's what I've been thinking.
Wow. What a great question. Maybe you're more religious than me. I think that. No, I don't think that it was an act of God. But if after 120 years, Emir Hashem, I went up and God said, remember that home run that I stopped? I wouldn't be like blown away. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't be surprised. But my theology believes, I shouldn't. I think there are certain things that God kind of lets happen in the world. And I think nature and baseball games are one of those things, are a few of those things. So that's my feeling. But it was pretty wild. That last pitch, the Lux.
Taylor's hit was even faster, harder, and farther, and
It would have been.
Yeah, according to the statistics.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, and even it was a rough game. It was a rough game for the Dodgers. There were a lot of things that, in any other night, could have gone differently.
But the Dodgers have never been enemies of the Mets.
No.
Why do you have a problem with the Dodgers?
It's a great question. It's because you really want. This is the real reason.
Because I'm sort of a little bit of a Mets fan too, because I grew up near you.
Okay, so I don't know the real reason, but I always didn't love the Dodgers because in New York. So the original teams in New York before the Mets, the Yankees are an old team, but were the Dodgers and the Giants. You guys know that? These are both New York teams. There's the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Yeah.
Right? And the Dodgers. You know what? I don't have a good answer for you, but let me just give the background. The Dodgers were playing in Brooklyn. They moved to L.A. and the Giants moved to San Francisco. The Mets, whose colors are blue and orange, right, took the blue from the Dodgers and the orange from the Giants, right? That's true. That's just true. And the logo of the Mets is the old logo of the Giants. Yeah. That's. Take a look. It's actually it's wild. So I always associated the Mets with the Giants because it was that same logo. And the rivalry of the Giants and the Dodgers made me kind of put the Dodgers on the outside, even though the Mets are really took the place. The Dodgers also had a huge rivalry against the Yankees, so I should really align myself more with the Dodgers. I hear what you're saying, Ms. Keene. I should like the Dodgers more. I'm going to try.
Okay, well,
Can I one more thing?
yeah.
Justin Turner is one of the reasons I don't like the Dodgers. Because Justin Turner was on the Mets. He was on the Mets, and he was like fine for the Mets. He wasn't great. Then he goes to the Dodgers, and is like this playoff machine. The guy's like he's awesome, and I hold that against him a little bit. Anyway. Yeah.
Okay, well, I really want to thank you, Rabbi Block, for your time, for spending a couple hours here tonight with us and answering our questions. Thank you all for tuning in. Anyone who tuned in on Instagram, the Shalom at Boiling Point website, Facebook. or YouTube. I want to give also a special thank you to Jacob Honig and Eli Weiss, who have been running our video cameras from behind the scenes. I think, is that gonna...
We just bring all the equipment.
Just bend down. There you go. There we are. There we
And
go.
I'd also like to give a thank you to Mrs. Keene as well as all the editors of The Boiling Point. Thank you so much for your time again.
course.
And The Boiling Point issue 1 came out last week. You can pick it up at Shall Have It or around on Pico, different restaurants, or you can see that at shallhaveboilingpoint.com. So thanks for tuning in and have a good night.
Go Dodgers.